Welcome, everyone, to the latest episode of Stars, Cells, and God. This is the show where we describe the latest discoveries happening at the frontiers of science and how those discoveries provide evidence for God's existence, the reliability of Scripture, and the Christian worldview. My name is Fuz Rana. I'm a biochemist and a Christian apologist, and I work for an organization called Reasons to Believe. Reasons to Believe is the organization that sponsors this podcast thanks to the generous donations of viewers and listeners like you. So if you want to know how you can support this podcast, or if you just want to learn about Reasons to Believe, go to our website, reasons.org, or you can follow us on social media, RTB_official. And then finally, don't forget to go to our YouTube channel, Reasons to Believe, and subscribe. There you can gain access to all kinds of great video content that explores a wide range of questions and issues related to the relationship between science and the Christian faith. And then while you're there, use the notification button so that you can be alerted when the next episode of Stars, Cells, and God drops. I have the pleasure today of being joined in studio by Dr. Casey Luskin, a friend. Casey, I think I actually knew you when you were an undergraduate or maybe a graduate student.
Undergraduate, that's right.
At UCSD.
Yes.
And you're heading up the Idea Center
yes.
at that time. So we've had a long history where our paths have crossed multiple times. So it's a pleasure to have you here. You're a geologist by training, but you also have you're also a lawyer as well. So you're dual degreed, and it's a pleasure to have you here just to talk about what I think to be a very exciting area of engineering that has, in my mind, some profound implications for the design argument.
Certainly, yeah. Great to be here with you, Fuz. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So, one of the things I like to do is kind of have a little segue to ease us into the discussion. And people are very interested in trends, right? If you're ever spent any time on social media, particularly on X, which used to be Twitter, they have you're always greeted with this kind of panel here about what's happening, where certain certain terms or certain hashtags are trending, and so everybody wants to know what's happening, what's everybody else interested in, what's going on in the world, what's attracting people's attention. But it isn't just those of us that spend maybe too much time on social media that are interested in what's trending. Scientists are as well, right? And one of the most trendy areas in science these days is biomimetics and bioinspiration. So could you let our audience know what biomimetics is, what bioinspiration is?
Sure. So this is a field that's been around, or a practice that's been around for a long time. It basically means turning to nature to inspire human technology. And you think of, Leonardo da Vinci marveling at the structure of a bird's wing and wondering if he could build a flying machine, or people, looking at trees and trying to figure out how can they, better create something to give you shade in your front yard. There's just so many different ways that we've used bioinspiration throughout human history. It's almost so commonplace you don't even realize it's there. But now we're finding that as we have developed more and more advanced technology, that actually we can use natural designs, biological features to inspire human technology at deeper and deeper levels that I think nobody ever anticipated, you'd be able to do it. So It's very interesting, yeah.
Yeah, and in some instances, you have scientists and engineers that are directly copying designs, from nature. In other instances, they're gaining fundamental insight that they wouldn't have had other than by studying the systems in nature.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, and so this is a critical way in which people today are not only creating new problems, but solving engineering problems that really are, seemingly intractable, in terms of our own human understanding. But just to show you just how important biomimetics and bioinspiration is, this is something that I pulled from the International Society of Bionic Engineering's website. There was an academic progress report published in early 2024 looking at what was happening in biomimetics in 2023. And there were 11,200 papers that were dealing with essentially biomimetics and bioinspiration research projects. So that's amazing. But in 2019, there were 7,900 papers published. So, which is in and of itself remarkable, but in the span of 3 years, 4 years, you almost have a 50% increase in the number of researchers that are reporting, insights that come from work in biomimetics.
The number of examples of this, Fuz, this is an astounding statistic that you've dug up here, but the number of examples of this is just off the charts. I mean, we could spend days and days and days going through all the examples of engineers and human technology designers using biology for inspiration. This is just really amazing what you found here. I had no idea it was this active.
Yeah, well, I didn't either. Now, I do see a lot of science in the news features that tend to give exposure to work happening in biomimetics and bioinspiration. So it's not just scientists and engineers that are interested. I think the lay public is also fascinated, I think, by this type of work because people can resonate and connect with nature, right? So it's something that I think attracts people's interest. But what we thought would be fun to do is just give our audience a few examples of the type of work that's happening in biomimetics and bioinspiration. Now, these are 3 papers that have been published in the scientific literature that just happened across my desk in the last week or so. I didn't go out and systematically review the literature looking for really cool examples. These are just things that happened across my desk. So this is a random sampling of papers published in the last few weeks. So just to give people, again, a sense for the really cool work that's happening. So you and I are going to discuss these papers, and I think you might have a few additional examples that you might want to throw our way. The first is a paper published in a journal, interestingly enough, named Bioinspiration and Biomimetics by a research team from Johns Hopkins University. And they were interested in the question, why do fish swim in schools? And I think most people understand, well, this is offering a protective setting for fish to avoid predation, but nobody really quite understands what's going on here. So these researchers decided to do a simulation study to try to understand, what's going on by, designing this 3-dimensional simulation of a mackerel, right? And then looked at what happened when you successively add individual mackerels to the group to build kind of a school, right? So this is a simulated school of mackerels. And they recognized that there was really an acoustical benefit by swimming in schools because, the idea here is that the acoustical fingerprint of a school of fish is less than the acoustical fingerprint of a single fish swimming in the waters, which now means that entire school is avoiding predation.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting study that you found here, Fuz, because, of course, we all know from wave theory that waves can cancel each other out.
Right.
So they found that if these fish, if they swam with their tails in unison, then the waves kind of added up and it actually made a larger sound. But if when the fish in the school were swimming, if they alternated their flapping of their tails, so they were sort of flapping in a way where they were not at the same phase, and the waves essentially could cancel each other out, you could have a school of fish, as you said, that would be making less noise, less turbulence in the water than a single fish would. And it's just astounding. This, of course, is a natural, I guess, camouflage protection feature of schools of fish that we probably never even knew about. But, of course, this could have applications because if you want to create some kind of a device or maybe a fleet of devices that can swim underwater in a stealth manner, fish have already figured out how to do this, so we could maybe mimic this.
Yeah, that's right. Well, one of the things that I found interesting in the study is that if they had 2 or 3 fish, they had to really work hard at having the appropriate distances between the fish. They had to be very careful about how the tails were not really synchronized, but desynchronized as they flapped. But as the group got larger and larger, those parameters became less and less important. And in fact, they even reported that the fish were actually more efficient at swimming in the water in a school because the same effects that actually dampened the sound from the school created a higher efficiency environment for the fish to swim in, so they could actually swim faster, expending less energy.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah. Well, and they talk about, these underwater, as you mentioned, these underwater, autonomous vessels that are now driven by propellers. And it's like, this is a really horrible design. But if you could create one where the movement was generated by a flapping action, that actually would be and you figured out how to control that flapping action, you could have very quiet, underwater vehicles, which has potentially military applications.
Absolutely.
And others as well.
I'm thinking Hunt for the Red October here, making stealth submarines.
Yeah. And so this is just a very quick image that I've taken from the paper, just giving people a sense of how they were going about doing the simulation studies. Okay, so the next study has to do with suction devices, right? So we all played around with suction cups and things like that. I got my grandson's a bow and arrow that had bows and arrows for Christmas that had suction devices, and they were shooting everything in the house. But they would get frustrated because it would stick to some things and not stick to others. But for a suction cup to stick, it has to have a flat surface that's clean, right? That is regular. Otherwise, the suction cup doesn't stick. But for most applications, that isn't really very useful, right? For example, the researchers are talking about using robotic arms, and having suction devices to pick up rough, irregularly shaped objects. So how do you go about doing that? So a research team from, I think, Bristol University actually tried to design this, a new type of suction cup by deriving inspiration from the suction cups used by octopi.
Yeah, and they found that basically by using some kind of a water or gel or mucus-based seal around the suction cup, you could allow that suction cup to attach to all kinds of irregular surfaces. And I'm sure this could have all kinds of applications, not just in robotics, but I'm thinking even in like space exploration. You're sending a probe to some other planet. You want it to be able to grab onto things very easily. Well, many marine organisms have already figured out how to do this. And it was octopus, but I think they also talked about cephalopods, but they also talked about gastropods, and I think they talked about echinoderms. Yeah. There's a number of different, very diverse marine organisms that use these sort of mucus-based suction cups to be able to grab onto strangely shaped things. Yeah. I grew up at the beach here in LA, and I remember, you find a limpet on a rock and you try to pry it off, or you're playing around at the beach as a kid, and it's just about impossible. I mean, and this could be any shaped rock. The degree to which marine organisms can attach themselves to weird shaped surfaces is really astounding. And you can try it with all your might, and when you're a kid, you cannot pry them off unless maybe you take a screwdriver, which I don't recommend doing this. But when you're a kid, you do things you probably shouldn't do. So
yeah. Well, and what they noted is that it's the mucus plus the musculature surrounding the suction cup in these animals. It can allow the suction cup to vary in shape, right? So it's the combination of both. And so they created. Here's a diagram from the paper. The top is how an octopus or another marine organism's sucker works, and then they create this multi-layer kind of silicon-based suction cup that gives the deformation that you need to attach to irregular surfaces, and they create a little pump system that actually delivers water as the fluid as opposed to some kind of mucus concoction. And again, they're showing a significant advantage. So as you point out, this has some really important applications.
And when you think about it, I'm sure that the original suction cup that was invented, for making bow and arrows, I give bow and arrows to my nephew just to annoy my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, because he'll shoot everything around. I'm sure even those very basic suction cups were inspired by nature to begin with, but now we're realizing, hey, these designs actually are even better than we realized. We can improve on these designs, and it just comes down again to mimicking nature.
Yeah. And then the last example that I have that I've pulled from Nature's, maybe the coolest one. And this is published in PNAS by a team from Penn State. And they were studying leafhoppers. And leafhoppers apparently secrete these geometrically shaped, materials that are shown here. They're actually on a nano scale, on nanometers in size, that have these openings or these holes, and it actually, as it turns out, makes the leafhopper invisible to predators, and so I think they're brachiosomes. Is that what they're called?
Brachiosomes, something like that. Yeah.
Brachiosomes,
And
yeah.
they're smaller than a bacteria. They're very, very, very small.
Yeah. So, so the dimensions are really critical because the UV light will go through the pores and get trapped inside the brachysome, and make the leafhopper invisible to birds and reptiles that can see in the UV. And then for visible light, the size of the particle actually causes the light to scatter, which also makes them invisible. And so their visibility is reduced by about 94% because they coat themselves with these items.
Yeah, basically you're scattering the light so you can't see the actual surface of the object that you're looking at. And they're saying that this could even lead to the development of cloaking devices, which is pretty cool. So I'm a Star Trek fan, a sci-fi fan, and obviously that seems very out there, but there are organisms in nature that are already kind of doing this.
Right. And so, part of the paper is describing how they manufactured or produced kind of analogs to what the leafhopper produces. But I also thought what was interesting as applications were that this could be used to actually protect light-sensitive materials. There are a lot of drugs that are light-sensitive, so you could actually package drugs with these, brachysome or analogs. You could even use it as a way to more efficiently capture solar energy to improve battery performance. So a lot of applications.
You're capturing all the light that's coming in. Yeah.
Yeah. Now you have I think maybe a couple of other examples that you wanted to bring to the table that would be fun talking about.
I mean, there's so many examples of this, but there's just a few that I've collected over the years that I've always been struck by. There has been the use of shark skin to imply faster swimwear for swimmers, trying to improve their speed when they're competing. And so they turn to shark skin to develop better swimsuit materials. Spiny hooks on plant seeds and fruits. That is what led to the development of Velcro. And I didn't realize that, but it's pretty amazing. Mimicking whale flippers has led to improved turbine designs. And this is a really bizarre one, but, hippos. I don't know if you've ever been to hippo, or seen hippos at the zoo, and in Africa you see these hippos just spend all day, sitting out there in these little lakes in the sun. But how do they keep themselves from basically burning to death in these low latitude, getting all these UV rays? Well, studying hippo sweat has been used to lead to better sunscreen. So because they were able to protect themselves from getting sunburned, essentially. And this is another cool one. Sunflowers have a shape that allows them to very efficiently harvest light that is coming in. And sunflowers are being mimicked to create better solar arrays for collecting energy from the sun. And again, the list goes on and on and on. We could spend all day doing this, talking about this. So, but there's just so many examples of using nature to inspire and improve human technology.
And so here is a great quote from one of the Penn State researchers who was involved in the work on the brachiosomes of the leafhoppers, and says, nature has been a good teacher for scientists to develop novel advanced materials. In this study, we have just focused on one insect species, but there are many more amazing insects out there that are waiting for material scientists to study, and they may be able to help us solve various engineering problems. They're not just bugs, they are inspirations. And in fact, that quote reminds me, I'd forgotten about this, that years ago I wrote a chapter for a book called God in the World of Insects. A guy named Josh Shoemaker, who's a friend of mine, works as an entomologist and had this vision for creating a book that dealt with entomology and what does it tell us about the case for a creator and how does it intersect other theological and philosophical issues like the problem of evil. It's a great book, but I wrote a chapter on insects being the inspiration for biomimetics, and had a number of examples of just insects, using natural technologies that inspired engineers to create new technologies, including termites in Africa that create these very massive mounds that are just the pinnacle of engineering in terms of airflow that keeps the interior cool, to the point that there was a mall designed using the same principles so they could keep the interior of the mall cool without using air conditioning.
Wow.
Stuff like that. So anyway, I think people get the point here that this is a really exciting and very important area of engineering. But, to me, it raises all kinds of very interesting philosophical and theological questions, and really, I think, gives very powerful impetus to the design argument. I mean, just at the most superficial level, this really highlights just how remarkable the designs are in biology, and how pervasive the elegant designs are. And this isn't just us cherry picking a couple of really cool examples. When you talk about 12,000 papers being published, or 11,200 papers being published every year, what this is saying is that nature has no shortage of sophisticated, elegant designs that are just really, mind-boggling, beyond what we would have even imagined just simply superficially looking at nature.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, Fuz. I mean, if nature is helping us to improve human technology, and yet we're being told that nature was not designed, how is that possible? When it's actually better than the intelligently designed technology that we are trying to create, and we're being told that nature is not designed. You and I talked about this yesterday, that so often, the media loves to report on examples of biomimicry, biomimetics. And so often when you read news stories about this, they will have a little throwaway line that says something like, over billions of years, evolution has perfected nature's design so that it can, produce better, best our human technology, or something like that. It's like, okay, I mean, is that really what's going on here? That this is not designed, that evolution produced this feature that actually outperforms our own human technology, and you're saying that this was not designed, and yet it's better than our own technology, which is designed. So I just think it raises an interesting question, is this actually not designed if it's outperforming the actual technology that we're creating?
Yeah, and I see those kind of comments myself all the time, and it's typically made by the researchers that are working in biomimetics and bioinspiration. But what's interesting to me is that if you read what evolutionary biologists are saying, particularly those evolutionary biologists that are really thinking about evolution in more theoretical terms, they go out of their way to make the point that evolution is thoroughly anti-teleological. There is no design, there is no real purpose, there is no intentionality. It is thoroughly anti-teleological. And so, for example, the idea here is that, the evolutionary process is understood as being unguided and undirected, right? And most evolutionary biologists reject adaptationism, which is kind of the high school biology version of evolution, where evolution just over vast periods of time keeps optimizing systems and creating these incredibly elegant designs. And most evolutionary biologists soundly reject adaptationism. That's been my experience. And they rather argue that, look, most designs in biology, quote unquote, are really evolutionary byproducts. They're evolutionary spandrels that are really not contributing to the organism's survivability. They are just the happenstance of evolution. They may or may not be useful, but they're not optimized. They're not these elegant systems. That evolution is, again, without direction, without purpose. It's all predicated on chance, and that the history of evolution constrains the outcome, meaning you're not going to get the best designs. You're going to get these inherently flawed designs that are suboptimal, that are far from perfect. And the mechanism, too, for evolution is, well, you co-opt existing designs and combine them in new ways to create new designs, but these are kludges, right, that again are that might get a little bit of fine-tuning through natural selection, but are fundamentally poor designs. And so this is a quote from an Italian philosopher of biology who wrote a book called Imperfection, Telmo Piovani, and he said, "We are children of an absent-minded creator called evolution. And on this journey to imperfection, we end up unable to remember anything perfect that came before us. From imperfection to imperfection, from deviation to deviation, here we are, the all-powerful and reckless Homo sapiens." So now you've got this dilemma or maybe contradiction where the people that are working in biomimetics and bioinspiration who really are not versed in evolution just attribute evolution as this incredible creator, but evolutionary biologists are saying evolution isn't that. So how then do we square that? And when we look at the nature of how people in the mainstream understand evolution, we wouldn't expect biology to be the source of inspiration.
Exactly. You're getting sort of this cognitive dissonance going on between people who are looking at biology and saying that it is actually amazingly designed. It's, they may not be intelligent design proponents or creationists, but they certainly are seeing that nature has these incredible designs. And these are the people who are doing biomimicry, biomimetics, the engineers who are studying the biological realm. But then you get these evolutionary biologists who, on the other hand, are saying, no, it's not well designed. This is just poorly cobbled together kludges. Evolution is a tinkerer, and it works with what it's got, and it never produces a very good design. And really, biology doesn't work very well. Well, which is it? You get these totally different perspectives on biology. And I would tend to trust the people who are actually looking at biology and trying to figure out, how we can use it to better improve human technology than the people who are telling us on a theoretical basis, oh, this really can't be very good because our theory tells us it was produced by this undirected, unguided process, as you said, Fuz, that really doesn't do anything useful. It just, takes what it's got and makes the best of it, duct tape, spit, chewing gum, sticks it together, and hopefully something comes out that works. So yeah, I would definitely trust the engineers who are actually using biology to make better designs than the theorists who are telling us, no, nothing to see here. I think it's amazing also that we have, at some points, we have designed human technologies and then found that those technologies were already in biology. So biology didn't necessarily inspire us to create this design. We came up with it independently and yet found that biology had done the same thing. And I'm thinking of the example of the rotary engine that obviously was designed, I believe, in the 19th century and early 20th century by human engineers. Before we had very highly sophisticated, powerful microscopes to study what was going on in bacterial organelles. Well, we now know that the cell is full of rotary engines. We've got the ATP synthase rotary engine. We've got the bacterial flagellum, which is a rotary engine. I'm sure there's other rotary engines in biology as well. And so what we found is that actually nature did it first, that biology was creating far more sophisticated rotary engines than we produced on our own. And yet we're saying that this was not designed, that this is just evolution tinkering with what it's got. I'm sorry, but when you open up biology, that's not what you find. I mean, I can't tell you how many times that engineers have looked at these so-called poor design arguments and found them wanting. There was a great paper done by Stuart Burgess, who's an engineer whose research we have funded at Discovery Institute over the last few years. He looked at some of these arguments from Nathan Lentz. I don't know if you're familiar with Nathan Lentz. He had this book titled Human Errors, where he said that basically the ankle joint and the ankle-foot complex is very poorly designed. And Stuart Burgess, as an engineer, looked at the ankle-foot complex and found actually it's very well designed for adapting a bipedal organism to be able to walk on various surfaces and reduce injury and absorb the shocks. He found that it's very, very well designed. So we could go through again many examples where people make these quote unquote poor design arguments, and then when you dig closer, you actually find that they're very well designed.
Yeah, well, I love the watchmaker argument, and so in my book, The Cell's Design, I presented kind of a revitalized watchmaker argument, citing things like the bacterial flagellum, the ATP synthase rotary motor, as really examples in biochemistry. And I document a large number that really give new vitality to the watchmaker argument, which is this idea that when we look at biology, we see these designs that are reminiscent of human designs. And if a human design requires a mind, then it's reasonable for us to think that the designs in biology or in biochemistry require a mind as well. And I even go so far to make what I call the watchmaker prediction, which is, hey, look, if the watchmaker argument is really valid, then as we invent new technologies, we will see examples of those in the cell already. And I cite a number of examples where that actually is the case. DNA wires, Brownian ratchets, and things like that. But then I've been playing around with another version of the watchmaker argument that I call the converse watchmaker argument, where this argument isn't based on analogical reasoning, but really abductive reasoning. And the way I frame it is something like this, that if the designs in biology are the work of a creator, they will be elegant enough to inspire new technologies. The designs in biology inspire new technologies, therefore it's reasonable to think they're the work of a creator. And then there's another version of that where you would say, if evolution is the designer, for what we see in biology, because of the nature of how people understand the evolutionary process, we wouldn't expect designs in biology to be valuable to inspire new technology. The designs in biology do inspire new technology. Therefore, it's not reasonable to think that evolution did it. So that's my biochemist playing philosopher attempt at formulating an argument using the insights from bioinspiration.
I love it, Fuz. I think it's a great argument. I think you could formulate it in Bayesian terms. If biology is inspiring human designs, which model is more likely? An undirected model like evolution, or a guided, directed, teleological model like design. And I think you've hit on something very profound with this argument there. I think that certainly a design argument is you framed it in this term. You said likely, far more likely that a teleological process produced these designs, these features, than an undirected one. So I love it. It's a great argument.
Yeah. So, the point being is that I think, this area of biomimetics and bioinspiration is fascinating, to dig into the details at the highest technical level. And I'm not an engineer, so there's a lot of probably, wow factors that I just don't even pick up on when I read the papers, again, as a biochemist. But this is a lot of fun to spend time reading about, in the technical, articles, but also in the general audience articles. And for me, this is a great opportunity for people to be able to introduce discussions about, is there even a creator that exists? Is design a valid idea? By first of all, talking about the really cool work that engineers have done, modeling new technology from designs in biology, and that can lead to some great conversations that people can have that have a philosophical, even theological significance.
Yeah, because we are used to seeing nature inspire technology in our everyday life. I mean, we're talking about airplanes or sunscreen or swimwear or, lots of different features that we use every day. People are accustomed to this, but I don't know if they ever take the next step to think, okay, why is it that nature is so good at inspiring human technology? Because that raises some very profound questions, as you said.
Yeah. Well, before I wrap everything up, Casey, is there anything else that you would like to add to this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to beat evolution too much here, but I do think there's also a danger, if you're coming at this from an evolutionary perspective, to assume sometimes that something isn't a good design and to possibly miss opportunities to be inspired by nature. And I'm sure you're very familiar with this example, Fuz, but the example of the vertebrate retina, which of course Richard Dawkins claimed, and many people have claimed, is a poor design. Well, why is that? Well, they said that because basically the optic nerve extends out over the retina. This is a bad design because it could block some of the light coming in. And of course, if you put a finger over one eye, you can get that little blind spot that is actually where the optic nerve is extending out over the retina. Richard Dawkins says that this design is just a byproduct of what evolution had to work with, and because of this, we end up with this bad design. He thinks it's an inelegant design where you get, the basically the nerve over, extending out over the retina, potentially blocking some of the light. But if you look at it from a design standpoint, there's actually, I think, a lot of insights to be gained. And of course, as people have studied the design of the vertebrate retina more, they realize, well, number one, we have two eyes. So having two eyes compensates for any blind spot that you would have normally from this design of the vertebrate retina. But number two, there are actually good reasons for having the vertebrate retina design the way it is. By having the nerves going out in front of the retina, you're able to maximize blood flow going into the back side of the retina, which of course our eyes, vertebrate eyes, require a lot of blood flow to be able to allow for this very highly acute vision that we have. Number two, though, and this is, I'm sure you're familiar with all this, but there's a really cool discovery which found that there are actually special cells called glial cells that can channel light through the nerve that is extending out over the retina. They act like fiber optic cables. And so here we're seeing, something that is now beginning to resemble human technology, using something like a fiber optic cable to channel light through this, little dense bundle of nerves onto the retina, so you fully compensate for any problems that having those nerves out in front of the retina, And so, again, what we're finding is that you have to be very careful if we look at something in biology and we're like, why is it like this? If your instinct is to say, well, it's probably like this because evolution just produced something that isn't very good at doing it, that might not be the best way to approach biology. And I'm not saying this to bash evolution. I'm saying this just as maybe just a good encouragement for those of us who are studying biology. Let's not necessarily assume that it's a poor design. Let's assume there's probably a good reason for this design, and then do the hard work of trying to figure out why it's designed the way it is. We might learn something we didn't expect when we approach it like that.
Yeah, you're making a really good point. And again, we want to be careful about bashing evolution, but I oftentimes will hear this challenge. Look, if we just say God did it, or that there's a designer, that just shuts down science. That creation or intelligent design is really, stultifying science. But your point is a really good one, is that, well, that evolution actually at times stultifies science, because if you think something is a bad design, why waste time and research dollars studying it? This is actually the case for junk DNA, where people just wrote it off as uninteresting regions of the genome that were vestiges of an evolutionary history. And how long did we delay making very important discoveries that have real-world implications in terms of the onset of diseases or how to treat diseases, by adopting this mindset that biology is producing these flawed designs, right? And it's only by accident that we've started discovering function for junk DNA. But an ID approach or a creation model approach wouldn't stultify science in my mind, because if you're asking the question, or if you draw the conclusion that there's a creator or a designer, well, then the question then becomes, well, how did the creator do this? Why did the creator do it that way? That curiosity would drive you to deeper study of the system, maybe more so than a materialistic evolutionary perspective.
No, exactly. And I think that the inspiration for this is not to bash evolution. It's to try to do better science and not miss things that we want to make sure we're studying. In the ID community, we sometimes divide up, and I'm sure you guys have thought about it in a similar way, divide up intelligent design arguments into two different categories. We have what we might call pure design arguments, where you're trying to detect design in nature. Can we say that the bacterial flagellum was designed? Can we say that the bird's wing was designed? Okay, so you look at all these complex features, you say, yes, there's great evidence for a mind, a creator behind, who designed the universe. Fine. But once you've made that conclusion, then you can do a different kind of design-based thinking, which we call it applied design. Now you're saying, if we start with the assumption that there is a design behind the universe, how can that help us better make sense of what we see in the world around us? So one of the projects at Discovery Institute that we're helping to support right now, I know that you've been actually helping to contribute to this project, Fuz, and we really appreciated that. We call it the Engineering Research Group, and basically it's a group collection of biologists and engineers who are working together under the assumption that if biology really is designed, if it really is engineered, then approaching it from an engineering sort of lens, an engineering paradigm, is going to help us make better sense of how biology works. And they're having tremendous success in terms of understanding biology through an engineering lens. I know you've made arguments along these lines too, so this is nothing new here. Reasons to Believe has done also some great work in this area. So it's just a great way, I think, to show that, as you said, a design or a creation-based paradigm can help contribute to science by not assuming that it's just, an evolutionary junk-based, design, but it actually was an intelligently designed feature that is that way for good reasons. And if we can discover those reasons, we can do better science.
Yeah, and I really love what the Discovery Institute is doing with that engineering group. And I've seen some of the work that's starting to come out of there, and it's really, really quite impressive. And I think, that is going to be maybe more significant in terms of advancing the case for design or the case for a creator, from our perspective, than even making these, as you said, the pure design arguments, because it's going to be hard to deny real results that are being driven by a view of biology that sees a creator or a designer that undergirds it.
Yeah, well, I can't take any credit for this because I'm not really directly involved with that group, but I think it's a great opportunity for people who do believe in a creator to work together and do better science, basically, and it's really exciting. It's a very positive argument for design. I think it resonates well with people. I think, like you said, it's going to have a big impact on people.
Yeah. Well, Casey, thanks so much for taking the time to be here with us and for the show. I had a great time hanging out with you and talking about this issue. I hope our viewers and our listeners enjoyed it as well. I just want to say again, thank you to all of you for joining this episode of Star Cells and God. You know what? If you've got some thoughts about what you've heard today or you have questions, please put them in the comment section. We actually read the comments and we will respond to those questions from time to time. And remember, go to our YouTube channel, Reasons to Believe, subscribe, use the notification button so you're alerted the next time a new episode of Star Cells and God drops. And don't forget to follow us on social media and visit our website, reasons.org. And also check out what's going on at the Discovery Institute. And I just want to remind you, until we meet again, the more that we know about science, the more that we have reasons to believe. God bless you.